Again, this is a special program today. David Hawkins joining me, of course. David, I think everyone is very interested in seeing you apply your unique reverse engineer crime scene investigation technique to what many people have a lot of questions about, of course, the California wildfires. I'm not getting your video at the moment, David. Can you, oh, sorry, that might be, let me do this. Yeah, we don't have your
wait
video.
a minute, I gotta switch it on.
Yeah. No problem. There we go.
That should be good.
It should be coming up right about now. There we go. We've got you. Good to see you, David.
Right.
And this, of course, this is a supplement to our normal. That's funny. Why am I not getting you there? That's very odd. Let's just try this real quick. First of all, let's do that. Hello, everyone. Welcome. And let me see if we can get David back. I see the problem. Sorry. So David, this is a supplement to our normal program that appears only on Patreon. This is something we're going to try to do every week. It's difficult sometimes to schedule so many shows in a day, but I think everyone is, you've got screen sharing going is what the problem is.
And let me just turn the light off so I don't look like a saint.
But for some reason, you've got screen sharing on your, I'm seeing me.
I just switched it on.
Turn that off, please.
Oh, all right. Okay, now I got to find out where I turn it off.
So we're here on YouTube today, of course, and there we go, perfect. Thank you, David. Lovely to see you. And we're going to be talking about ConAir, Serco patents and how nanowaves may have been used to cause the California wildfires. Is that correct, David?
Yeah, absolutely. It's fascinating because a lot of people noticed that there was a way that home-seeding trees singled out and trees were left untouched, although the odd tree looked like it had been created like a furnace from the inside out, and the bark was hadn't caught fire, but the inside was burning, which of course reminds most people, I think, of when you put food into a microwave.
Exactly.
Right? And so using the technique, let me just turn that sound off. Just hold on a minute.
Sure. So we're a bit of an ad hoc start today. It's, I've got 3 shows scheduled today. People might have just seen my conversation with Jim Fetzer.
Sorry about that.
No problem, David. We're, everybody's just kind of getting to it here. I was explaining to anyone who might have missed it. I just had a conversation with Jim Fetzer where we were debating his theory that holograms were used to strike the World Trade Center rather than airplanes, and I don't want to derail our conversation today, but I do believe that you agree with me that that's an absurd theory that is completely unfounded by science.
Yeah, Jim Fetzer, I joined Scholars for 911 Truth, and he booted me off when I pointed out that his pension fund, the teachers' pension fund, I believe the biggest private pension fund in North America, had the mortgage on building number 7 up to October 2000.
Really?
And then sold it to the Blackstone private equity group, headed up by Peter Peterson, who I think was the one who beat little Valerie Percy to death, but that's kind of by the by. Wow. Anyway, I pointed out that he didn't seem to be too keen on the possibility of a conflict of interest, because if the teachers had a residual interest in the mortgage on building number 7, including the insurance package, which seemed to double the money, then the teachers could very well have done an extremely lucrative maneuver by helping to pull building number 7. Wow. Anyway, he didn't like that, so he booted me off Scholars for 911 Truth. So I'm not very respectful of Mr. Fetzer, professor or otherwise.
Well, that's interesting information to have. I had met Jim Fetzer only recently. I've watched him on YouTube and elsewhere. I've liked some of the guests that he's had with regard to researching the JFK assassination. Particularly Larry Rivera and Ralph Sinkay had done quite a lot of interesting photogrammetry work and 3D reconstructions of historical photographs. So I don't want to take too much time talking about Dr. Fetzer, but that's interesting information to have. I just wanted to have a debate with the guy. I think we can disagree and still be friends and civil, but he got very upset. So I don't think we need to address that any further. But David, what did you mean? Like today's title, I'm always trying to understand what the titles mean. And of course, CIA Nanowaves you were talking about. Yes,
the CIA agent that I believe has been planted in our hearts and our souls, that without actually declaring herself, is a woman by the name of Joanne Isham, Isham, Joanne Isham. And Joanne Isham had a very important role. And, you know, when we get to discovery, and you and I think, are getting quite good at discovery on the fly, which I believe will be an important role when injured communities, such as the relatives of the firefighters that died on 911, think that they might want to bring a class action suit for wrongful deaths, I believe we can show them the way. So let me go back to Joanne Isham. I think a lot of these people need to be asked in a court of law, or even on your show or our show, is what were they doing on the morning of 911? I'd really like Joanne Isham to tell us what she was doing, because she had a critical role, or potentially a critical role, which is she was the founder and CIA director on the National Image and Mapping Agency. Now, the National Image and Mapping Agency would have had a bird's eye view, obviously if it's fulfilling its responsibilities to the American public, of what was going on 911, because it would have looked down images of the path taken by the alleged hijackers as they moved these peculiar routes where somehow they managed to go around the United States Air Force normal response procedure. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the normal response procedure, if there's an errant aircraft or object up in the skies, if it's 5 minutes off azimuth, which means direction, or 5 minutes off waypoint or timing, then normally the air traffic controllers that pick that up would turn to the supervisor, and the standard procedure would be the supervisor would then call the nearest Air Force base, and an interceptor would be scrambled, maybe with a sort of Field McConnell if he was flying at that time.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I think I'm unable to correct you even if you are wrong, because I think you know quite a bit more about this than I do, and we would have to consult field. Now, I'm sorry to distract for just a moment, David, but before you carry on with this very important explanation, I just noticed that as we were looking at Wikipedia, they've got a little banner up here and they're asking for people to provide money. Now, I did send $5 to Wikipedia because even though you know, we question the veracity of it at times, it's certainly a tool that we're using all the time, and I think people should make up their own minds if they want to support Wikipedia. But it does raise the important point, David, that you and I are not funded by advertising, because so much of what we talk about here is far too controversial for advertisers to get involved with, and we don't want corporate sponsors. Right now, this program that we're doing here on YouTube and Periscope and Facebook and VK.com and DLive and Patreon is a supplement to the shows that we're normally doing on Fridays, which appear only on Patreon, and people can watch those shows by becoming sponsors on Patreon.com /CSI Storyboards or Patreon.com /crowdsource the truth. And I would encourage people to become sponsors on both of those channels, because we really do need to take back our freedom to choose what we get to watch. Of course, Reverse CSI Storyboards is David's Patreon channel, and he's posting all the videos that we do together, as well as his own posts that you can only get on Patreon.com /Reverse CSI Storyboards. So people who enjoy David's analysis and like seeing David and I work together, I really would encourage everyone to become sponsors of both of those channels. David, I'm sorry for that blatant commercial interruption, but please carry on.
And thank you for that support, and that financial support for me is very valuable, very valued, and very needed, because I don't think people necessarily understand the size of what we're up against collectively, and what we're up against can buy almost infinite exposure and manipulation of the perceptions of the public as to what's going on in the world. So We can't level the battlefield, if you will, but what I will say is I think we have collectively discovered the swamp which Mr. Trump or President Trump would like to drain. Now, the reason why he won't drain it could be multiple. One is that he's afraid of the consequences of attempting to drain it, which could be fatal. I mean, that's not a threat, but that's what these people do, right? Or the other is that he doesn't know where to find the plug. And I think you and I was thinking metaphorically when you were plugging our two collective Patreon accounts,
right?
That there's that extraordinary visual manifestation of someone pulling the plug on us on 911, because those buildings coming down, to me, metaphorically, if you will, someone's pulled the plug on free market capitalism and democracy, right? And so I think I know where that segregated fund is on 911. But let me just go back to the situation with the California fires. So Joanne Chisholm, this extraordinary woman, she oversaw the prosecution of Aldred Ames. If I got that right, probably the most dangerous spy together with Russell Hanson in the pantheon of spies in the United States. And I think the CIA knew about him a lot earlier than they're pretending. And I think Joanne Isham knew about it, right?
Aldrich Ames, I think.
Aldrich Ames, right. So now she, I think, launched the National Image and Mapping Agency as a kind of amalgam of other geographic data gathering agencies around the 1st of October 1996. And that's a very interesting year for the destiny of the Republic, because on October the 22nd, 1996, there was a meeting in the Great Hall of Justice where these people were celebrating the reinvention of government. Now, I probably imagine that 99.999% of Americans didn't know that their government was being reinvented, and quite possibly might have felt that it didn't need to be reinvented. It needed to be cleaned up. The swamp needed to be drained. But you can't drain the swamp during the Clinton era, because they need to be well clear of any swamp draining, because otherwise they might turn around and send a hit team, and you've got boys on the track, or the famous crimes of Arkansas, where people tend to shoot themselves in the back of the neck twice when they're committing suicide. Right? So we need it. People are scared of the Clintons, and rightfully so, but the Clintons are puppets, right? So anyway, back to this woman Isham. Now, right now, she's a director, I think an independent director of an outfit called Maxar Technologies. And Maxar Technologies formerly was called McDonnell Detweiler and Associates. And if you recollect, Jason, McDonnell Detweiler and Associates on May the 3rd of 2001 announced it had been awarded a contract by the United States Air Force for instrument approach procedures.
Yes.
Where you could take a plane off its regular en route airway, fly it through various routes to avoid towers, repeat towers, and presumably the inference being land it safely. However, as I point out from my technical background, really landing it safely depends on the objectives of the person who's operating the software and where they are. So you might have the good guys in the cockpit and the bad guys at the air traffic control centers operated by Serco. And people may wish to know that Serco is the world's largest non-state air traffic controller.
Yes.
So at 911, it had, I believe, 68 FAA contract towers, where these are small airfields operated by Serco staff, giving you a great opportunity, if you have the technology, to apply this McDonnell Detweiler and Associated software and take the planes that were hijacked on 911 off their regular en route airway, fly them through instrument approach procedures into final approach procedures to take out key targets in the United States. Now, this is fairly scary, I would think, for people in the United States, and particularly in the United States Air Force, because it seems like they handed over control of the skies to this Canadian company, McDonnell Detweiler, which is now called Maxar.
That's MDA, McDonnell Detweiler and Associates, right? There it
Yes,
is. McDonnell
yes.
Detweiler. Maxar is formerly, so McDonnell Detweiler, it's not just a subsidiary, this is the new name for McDonnell Detweiler and
Yes,
Associates.
yes. So I think as a result of the work which I started formally, I think on sometime in 2000, I looked at the manipulation of McDonnell Detweiler shares and I said, hey, we've got organized crime in here. So I actually contacted through my late wife's friend. She was the wife of the head of security of the British Royal Navy, a guy called Andy Duport. And I emailed him and I said, would you please take a look at McDonnell Detweiler? This was around, I think, October 2000. He called back, or he sent me a message back, please stop contacting us. We don't know who you are, right?
Wow.
So on October the 10th, I think, 2000, or maybe it was October the 12th, the USS Cole, the most advanced frigate in the
Right.
United States Navy, was ordered, and I believe this was a hack, to go into Aden Harbor to refuel. Historically, it had always refueled in that area at sea because Aden was not a safe port. So the USS Cole moors against the dock, against one of those bumper tires, you know,
Yep.
that stop the metal being damaged by the dock. And
Yeah.
apparently inside the tire was enough explosive that had it been aligned with the ship's magazine, it would have been blown into a million pieces and no one would have survived.
David, remind us what the ship's magazine is. That's where the fuel is stored?
That's where the ammunition is stored,
Oh, wow.
right? Now,
Well, I remember this is one of the early attacks that was attributed to Al-Qaeda. When 9/11 happened, they referred to this attack. This was in Yemen, right? The bombing of the USS Cole?
Yes, yes. And so they started talking about Al-Qaeda, but this is the years when the head office of Osama bin Laden is in London.
Right. What was that thing called again?
The head office of Osama bin Laden?
Yeah.
It's something about, I don't know, it's a sort of codey word, but that's where the propaganda and the faxes came from.
Right.
And the money to send the sleeper cells into the United States for the 9/11 attack. Now, in order to get a visa, this is fascinating, to bring the sleeper cells, the Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda sleeper cells into the United States, you have to go to the National Visa Center, which since 1994 has been run by Serco. I mean, you guys, I mean, I love America and I love Americans. You can't be so dumb, right? I don't believe.
I have nothing to do with it.
Well, I know, but when we look at the Clintons, those guys should be behind bars, right? Because This is 1994. So Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton, whose sexual orientation I don't want to explore, more than I have to, right? Set up DOJ Pride in 1994 to represent the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgendered interests in various government departments under the Department of Justice, including the United States Marshal Service, the Office of Justice Program, the FBI, the DEA, and the Bureau of Prisons. Mm-hmm. Now, we've discussed this before. Why on earth do we need to have a community, and that's what community organizers do, incidentally, inside the Department of Justice that is based on the sexual orientation of these people? Because this can cause endless problems, because the Office of Justice Programs runs the pedophile tagging and prisoner tracking services of the Department of Justice.
Is there a pedophile tagging department?
Well, this is the name that I've given to it, right?
Got it.
Because
Okay.
there are, because this would be an amalgam of the database for missing and exploited children, National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, set up by Christine Marcy in 1984, right? Together with the tracking system invented allegedly
Jerome
by
Lemelson.
a guy called Jerome Lemelson. And
Right.
if you read through that, you can find that the rewards or privileges or deprivileges of the prisoners or parolees are distributed through some combination of artificial intelligence expert system and fuzzy logic algorithms. That is to say, they've taken the mens rea, the guilty mind, out of it. So I can hire, or the Department of Justice Pride organization, if they so wish, they can hire a SWAT team, right, through Serco to go into Aden and blow up the USS Cole. And I believe that's what they did. Because inside the Department of Justice, you have traitors that would make the average American blush, I would think.
Oh, absolutely. Now, David, as I'm often apt to do in my sort of ADD way, when you brought up the company Maxar, and
Yes.
I put their website here for everybody, sorry, for everybody to see, I noticed that, you know, speaking in line with the title of today's episode, they have this news item here talking about here's where the Woolsey fire burned through the hills of Southern California, and I guess it's an article from the New York Times, the LA Times. So the Woolsey fire, I found that kind of strange. Why are they calling it the Woolsey fire? Because that makes me think about this guy who is, of course, James Woolsey, who was the CIA director in 1994, the exact time period that we're talking about right now. Why is this fire named after this former CIA director?
I don't have an answer for that, but I think we're going to find that the CIA fingers are all over this, because through the National Image and Mapping Agency, people like Joanne Isham have a real-time access to the next target. Now, what do I mean by the next target for, let's say, people inside the National Image and Mapping Agency? Well, the next target would be selected through a system, and it wasn't invented by McDonald Detweiler. Apparently it was invented by Apple, and possibly before that by me back in the 1980s, through a drag and drop interface. So let's say you want a network of homes in paradise to be burnt up. So at night, you mobilize or deploy these Maxar satellite systems through the Nanowave, microwave transmitters, the high power transmitters. You can actually focus several satellites with microwave high powered transmitters on homes in paradise. And my understanding is that people were saying at night there were blue sparks flashing around and fires were breaking out spontaneously. I think I saw the figure about 80 different sites, and the fire chief in California, or one of the fire chiefs, said he'd never seen fires break out simultaneously at different places, and he's scratching his head, what could cause it? Because adjacent to the homes, the trees are untouched, or some of the trees are untouched, right? So now what I think they're doing is they're destroying homes. Now, why, you might legitimately ask, why would they destroy homes? What I suggest is that you have developed this extraordinary concept of socially responsible investment, and that's referred to in that method. I'm sorry?
I'm just remarking at this photo of this melted car, and these bushes are totally, like, untouched.
Yes. Well, this would be consistent, and again, it comes back to this theory that you and I are developing on the fly, that when you see something that is really outside the expectation of fire chiefs who have a great deal of experience, go into the patent office and see if you can find patented devices, systems, or methods that, if they were activated, would actually explain the melting aluminum and the melting metal around these fires. They're incredibly hot, right?
And no effect on bushes.
Right. So what what I've discovered is if we go back to that extraordinary meeting on the 47th floor of the North Tower on the morning of 9/11, we have Serco shareholders which have aggregated themselves into what appears to be a $100 trillion trust.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at the wording of the CFPH, and I think CFPH stands for Cantor Fitzgerald Patent Holdings or something like that, right? You have this invention, methods and systems for combining securities and carbon credits, priority date 2006, and the patent was granted in 2014. You know, whenever I see a big gap between priority dates and patents granted, I immediately think of Jerome Lemelson and the submarine patent. And the last show, you pointed out, why would people keep a patent secret? And I pointed out, well, if you go back to World War II, when the Allies had, the British had developed the cavity magnetron, friend or foe identification, and the proximity fuse,
Mm-hmm.
they didn't want the Germans to find out about it. Right. Equally in the UK, a lot of the production capabilities were having the hell bombed out of them by the Luftwaffe. So Sir Henry Tizard, the chief scientist working with Churchill and Victor Rothschild, he goes to Washington with a whole box of prototypes and papers and so on, and he sits down with various industrialists, including, I believe, David Sarnoff of RCA, and they work out a deal where Radio Corporation of America got to take out a patent for the cavity magnetron and produce them in huge numbers at vast profits. But the understanding, which still applies today, is, I believe, the British or the Crown can always use any patent issued, right? Those are what are called Crown rights rules. So today, what we're facing at, I believe, if you take the microwave system developed and invented by the British, I think we have microwave technology that would allow Maxar and Joanne Isham, if she so choose, to selectively ignite very, very hot fires in homes and leave the trees untouched and basically trigger what is known as a catastrophe bond, which was taken out by PG&E, I think, in July. It was a $200 million catastrophe bond that has probably been triggered by the home fires. Over to you.
Right, you've spoken about these catastrophe bonds. So PG&E, so they take out a catastrophe bond saying, hey, there's these fires all the time in California, and if we should, okay. So I see, you've obviously looked at this and seen this. There is this 200, well, let's bring it up. We've got this right here, David, which is Cal Phoenix RE Wildfire Cat Bond, launched at $200 million for PG&E Corp. This was in July of this year. The first pure wildfire exposed catastrophe bond has come to market. Did people know about this? So it's California.
Well, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, yeah. It's come to market as California-focused electrical utility PG&E Corporation, the Pacific Gas and Electric Corporation, turns to the capital markets and ILS. That's certainly not Instrument Landing System, but that's an investment group, I guess. Source of collateralized insurance protection. I gotta say, I don't know exactly what collateralized means, but I recognize this word from the mortgage catastrophe. This is putting together a lot of stuff.
Collateralized debt obligations, that sort of thing.
Right.
So you borrow money, and President Trump, of course, has borrowed a lot of money in his time, and the people who lend it to you look at you rather cynically, and they say, hey, I don't think we're going to get our money back, so what are you going to give us by way of security? So they collateralize it, right? And so in the case of Trump, maybe they would have taken his entire operations. In the case of this fire, they collateralized it through, for example, a reinsurance market. So the idea of a cat bond is you have a sponsor and you have an investor. So let's say the sponsor, which is this PG&E outfit, or its insurers say, well, we're going to be cleaned out if everyone sues us for igniting fires in Phoenix, in Paradise, and burning the entire town down. So let's put a cat bond out where you put down a certain amount of money, which you only lose if the catastrophe doesn't happen. You go to the investors, right, which might be a network of dumb pension funds that have handed over their funds to the so-called global custodians. They don't believe anything could burn down an entire town like Paradise. So they put a lot of money into the pot, and then an escrow lawyer will hold both sets of funds. It'll hold the sponsors' funds and the investors' funds. If the catastrophe happens, all of the investors' money is transferred to the sponsor. If it doesn't happen, the sponsor's money is transferred to the investor. There's various combinations of that. But now you have a moral hazard because the sponsor makes a killing if the catastrophe happens, if you see my drift.
Yes.
Right? So there's an argument for the sponsor to go out and maybe, example, loan some of its patents, right, or lend or license its patents to a sabotage team, which I believe, universally going back to probably the 1920s, has been RCA-GB 1929, which is obviously in 1929 Radio Corporation of America, which had stolen all the Marconi patents, has a wholly owned subsidiary set up in 1929. And after Second World War, RCA-GB 1929 gets the contract to operate the 4-minute warning for the Brits. And in 1988, it has a management buyout, which then turns to an IPO, and it gets called Serco. Jason, over to you.
David, I'm sorry, I'm a bit distracted because I was just noticing what is a pretty sharp decline in PG&E stock that occurred on Thursday, November 8th, taking the stock price from $47.80 down to a low here in the past couple of weeks of $17.74.
Well, that is consistent with the various kinds of fraud in the stock market, which is pump and dump, insider trading, outsider trading, and money laundering. And I think these cat bonds are superb vehicles for money laundering because you can sit both sides of the bond with money that you, as an investor, that you need laundering, and you can control the sponsor. So you pick up the sponsor's money when the catastrophe happens. So you've got this is where the swamp lies, I think. This is what Trump needs to know. And I think we can teach him.
Amazing. Now, David, going back to this woman, Isham, where is she? Joanne Isham. Again, I think that even though people sometimes doubt the authenticity of posts on Wikipedia, it is a resource. Sorry, David, I'm getting over this cold. It is a resource that we use quite frequently, and it gives us some interesting information. She was the, what was it here? She was the Director of Congressional Affairs. She was the Deputy Director of the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. So I seem to recall that there was a woman who was a satellite specialist who was murdered on the same day as Seth Rich. So I guess that would have been like July 7th, 2016. Let's see if we can find her because her name escapes me at the moment. Do you know who I'm speaking about?
No, while you're looking for that, though, there's been a very famous murder in the French Alps where a British specialist working for the small satellite company that has been taken over by Maxa, he gets, I think, beaten to death up in the French Alps with his wife, and the child survives. And there was a huge investigation. But you see, this will be consistent with concealing the relationship between these massive crimes like high-value target and mass casualty events and the various people who are insiders of the technology. So I believe there are people in McDonald Detweiler who are terrified out of their skin at having got caught up in this situation, because I believe now Maxar has the ability to overlook a battlefield or a crime site, as it's called by Kim Rosmo, before it happens, and uses drag and drop technology to identify which clump of individuals are not going to see the following day. And what they're doing is they're continuously calculating the amount of carbon dioxide or the weight of carbon dioxide saved by killing people and destroying the vehicle in which they're traveling. Now, let me just give as an example. When those Boeing aircraft on 911 were taking off, they represented on that particular journey a certain amount of carbon dioxide that would be dumped into the atmosphere. If you persuaded yourself, as these clowns have, that carbon dioxide is a driver of catastrophic anthropogenic global warming, you have a socially responsible obligation, hence socially responsible investor, to make sure that that aircraft doesn't reach its destination, because then it's not going to dump any more carbon dioxide, notwithstanding other aircraft will continue to do so. So that invention of carbon credits versus socially sustainable investing by CP Cantor Fitzgerald, of course, could be the main vehicle by which you control carbon dioxide being dumped into the atmosphere and causing catastrophic global warming. Over to you.
Right. Well, David, once again, the people who are with us in the chat have reminded me that it's Molly McCauley who was murdered, and she was working for the GSA, I think. She was a satellite specialist, and I don't know that that's, there's an award here, the Molly K. McCauley. Is this, yeah, this is Resources for the Future. Do you know about this murder, David?
No, but I think I'll look into it, because what's so fascinating with the work we do, Jason, is you have a high-value target that is quite often the hit is buried in the mass casualty event. So, for example, in 911, you had Carlton Bartels, who was the specialist in CO2 trading, and he had a couple of patents, and he worked with Cantor Fitzgerald.
Right.
I think he was the high-value target. Now, these people, particularly when they're using algorithms, there's no compassion. Like, I think they'll kill 658 people in order to get at the one high-value target.
Absolutely.
In this case of Molly McCauley, I think she's a high-value target, but they haven't bothered to surround her with a mass casualty event, which can be a distractor. So I need to look at that. I wasn't aware of
what they did
her
as the distractor, I believe, was this murder of Seth Rich, which received quite a lot of attention, and he's been linked to WikiLeaks and the DNC information and all that. So I haven't heard much about Molly McCauley recently, and it certainly wasn't something very much in the national news, but this is Molly right here. And police are still searching over a year later for the person responsible for killing Molly McCauley. She was 59 and stabbed to death in an affluent Baltimore neighborhood. She was attacked while walking her dogs. I remember that aspect, like this type of violent murder in this neighborhood was really anomalous. It's not like she was, walking in some dingy street in Chicago or New York or some dangerous place. She's in her neighborhood with dogs, and someone approaches her with a knife, which, I mean, again, that seems like a specific kind of murder. It's not like shooting somebody and stealing their money or whatever. They obviously wanted to be silent and make sure that she was dead. So I'll be very interested for you to look into this, David. And again, as you've said, this on-the-fly discovery process that we've entered into is it's like asymmetric crime solving, because we have so many minds between the people that we have watching right now and commenting here in the live chat, which I've got a new program, David, that aggregates all the chat comments from both YouTube channels, Periscope, VK.com, Discord, and so we get a lot of comments. I'm doing my best to keep up with all the comments, and of course Discord is available to people who become sponsors on patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. It's also very important that people sponsor David on patreon.com/reverse CSI storyboards. I think people are beginning to appreciate and understand the power of doing this kind of reverse crime scene investigation, and we could not do that without David. So please go to patreon.com/reverse CSI storyboards and sign up to sponsor David there. So yeah, Molly Macaulay, Geospatial Agency. What is it called again, David?
Well, the one I'm most intrigued by because of its proximity to Joanne Isham is the National Image and Mapping Agency. And I believe that's now a broad tent, and they change their name periodically. And I think sometimes they do that intentionally because it's hard to go work through the algorithms and see whether what you've got now is what you had before. For example, the change in name to McDonnell Detweiler. I've hammered McDonnell Detweiler since before the USS Cole got blown up in Aden Harbor, or nearly blown up. And I believe what happened with McDonnell Detweiler, it was taken over from Orbital Sciences of Dulles, Virginia, through the CAI Private Equity Group. Now, you might argue...
right.
Yeah, exactly. You might argue that stands for Canadian American investors. You might equally argue it's a front for the CIA. I think it's a front for the CIA, right?
What causes you to think that?
Because when they took over McDonnell Detweiler in 1999, December, I think, what they'd done, and we'll come to the they in a minute, they had sued Orbital Sciences of Dulles, Virginia, for misrepresenting revenues from McDonnell Detweiler. But the people who were suing them were very interesting because it included NYSER's, New York City Employees Retirement System, which contains the funds of the firefighters who would subsequently die in large numbers on 911. And I think the idea is they wanted to detach McDonnell Detweiler from Orbital Sciences of Dulles, Virginia, because Orbital Sciences of Dulles, Virginia was responsible for the development of software and interception to take out ICBMs coming over the pole. So when McDonnell Detweiler was absorbed into Orbital Sciences, and I met John McDonnell, the founder of McDonnell Detweiler, in 1995, because I wanted to explore the possibility of him selling McDonnell Detweiler to the company that I'd worked with in the United Kingdom called Rakel Defense Electronics, because Rakel had helped me develop some of my AI systems. Anyway, that's kind of by the by. As far as McDonnell Detweiler is concerned, when they went to work with Orbital Sciences of Dulles, Virginia, they would have learned all of the protocols for intercepting attacks such as ICBMs over the North Pole or domestic attacks, including the hijackings of 911. By bringing them back to back to Canada, of course, you now had the expertise to ride past the United States Air Force during the 911 attacks and take out the targets. So now, McDonnell Detweiler changes its name to Maxar, and this woman, Joanne Isham, becomes a director of Maxar, which would give her access to the nanowave technology, microwave technology, that could explain the fires breaking out in the houses, but not touching the trees in Paradise.
So what is that nanowave technology, David? What do we know about that?
It's microwave technology. So you go back like radar. Radar is microwave, right? So when the Brits invented the cavity magnetron, apparently it was invented or perfected in the laboratories of Birmingham University. Back in 1935 or 1940, Victor Rothschild was browsing that lab, and he picked up a prototype, and he took it away with him, right? 2 or 3 days later, he notified the head of scientists, whose name I forget, in the Birmingham laboratory, he should be more careful about security. But what that means is in 1939 or 1940, Victor Rothschild would have known all of the technology necessary to make the cavity magnetron that added great precision to the surveillance systems carried by the British aircraft. They could now pick out a periscope from a German U-boat a mile away. So it's a huge increase in the resolution of the radar systems.
Wow.
They bring it over to the United States, right? They then allow RCA in the United States to pick up the patent for the cavity magnetron. RCA starts making thousands of these things at vast profits, incidentally. And then the British have the right to use anything that RCA produces or patents as part of their agreement. So all you've got with this radar system or microwave is you've got a more intense and focused beam of high temperature microwaves that can ignite these homes in paradise from a distance and from multiple satellites. So to coordinate that, of course, you need something like Maxar and someone with the expertise of Joanne Isham. Now, I'm not saying she did it, but however, she has motive, she has opportunity and weapon. If there's a lot of money to be made with these catastrophe bonds. Over to you.
Yeah, so motive, means, and opportunity. So, we usually see on these defense websites, they have the different, weapons that they offer.
If you look at Nanowave images, you'll find a nice collage, I think. Just Google Nanowave images. There's one there that shows aircraft, satellites, and defense.
Okay, bring that up right now. Now, David, at 5 o'clock today, I will have Charles Ortel on. There's a lot going on in terms of the Clinton Foundation. Now, so wait a minute. I just looked up Nanowave as one word, but this doesn't seem to be...
Yeah, Nanowave Technologies is the name of the company. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I had them here just a moment ago.
And if you look at images, I'm sure you'll... Yeah, that one. Right? Or maybe that's Maxar.
Here, products.
Yes, so those products go into all of these devices, the satellites, the Boeing aircraft, the radomes, and the assembly labs, et cetera, et cetera. And essentially microwave, it's a radar system, it's a short wavelength, high energy, and if you can focus it from multiple sources, and you might call that a death ray. So if you've got a whole bunch of small satellites up in the air, you can actually have them all pointing their own microwave transmission towards a home or a set of homes in paradise, and you ignite the village or you ignite the town and you leave the trees intact. I mean, because there's no interest for these people in pointing it at a tree.
So you have little doubt that these directed energy weapons exist and can shoot high intensity beams from outer space to destroy things on the Earth?
Yes. And that's a great way of using a drag and drop interface to identify which clump of houses you want to take out. And at the same time as you do that, you adjust your insurance through a cat bond, right? So you make a killing because the investors never thought that all of those houses would build at once, would go up at once, right? So You're manipulating the insurance market.
Now, David, I don't know if we've discussed very much Dr. Judy Wood's research on the dustification of the buildings on 9/11. Do you think directed energy weapons were a component of what destroyed the buildings on 9/11?
Directed energy, first of all, bringing a lot of energy to a mass as big as the World Trade Center, you just can't do it, I don't think. What I think happened with the World Trade Center is they pumped thermite powder into the elevators with something that carries a lot of oxygen, maybe iron oxide or something like that. So and even they could go pump up the central box column. Right? So you've got those massive 4-inch thick steel at the bottom with the box columns running all the way to the top. All you need to do is inject a thermite powder and have it blown up the center of the box columns and the elevator shaft. And when you ignite that, now the ignition process might very well be through a directed energy weapon. So let's say you have a few plates of what I call a smacksonic, which is 2 aluminum sheets with rocket fuel in between. If you can induce a spark with a directed energy weapon between those 2 plates, you ignite the rocket fuel or the thermite dust. The thermite dust then has a reaction temperature of 5,800 degrees Fahrenheit, which actually turns the steel in the immediate vicinity to a plasma. And then you get the dust effect and everything floats away in the wind.
Wow. There's some amazing pictures of this fire in Paradise, California. It really, I know a lot of people who watch Crowdsource the Truth have been following this fire. This is really one of the first times I've explored the details of it, so thank you for bringing some of this to our attention. I'm sure you've been through a lot of these photographs here. It's really astounding. Yeah, how does it melt a car, but the trees are still standing and have leaves on them?
Well, you know when you put a metal foil around your fish and chips in the microwave, metal foil sparks, right? I don't know
when I'm in London microwaving fish and chips. Yeah.
Well, you're told to remove the metal wrapper, right?
Yes.
Otherwise, you're going to get sparking.
Right.
Well, a car, of course, is full of metal, so you can get sparking between the elements if you can bring together enough microwave energy. Now, at one satellite, it would be extremely difficult, but I think SSL, which is the small satellite arm of Maxar Technologies, I think they have now 80 small satellites in orbit. Some are in geostationary orbit, which means you could take 10 or 20 of them. Each one of them has, let's say, a microwave transmitter. You point them, and this can be done very quickly because you really want a spark to initiate the heat, right? You can just sweep through paradise, and you can ignite all the houses inside the town.
Wow.
You probably need a decoy, so you light a fire on the edge so that people get evacuated, right? But now, I believe there's 1,000 people missing, and I think there's well over 100 dead and confirmed dead. But where do all these people go to?
I don't know.
Well, I don't know. Maybe they were in a fire that was so hot that
vaporized?
I don't say. Yeah, they're vaporized. Again, how many autopsies do we have for the people inside the Pentagon's U.S. Navy Command Center? 125 people, top secret experts in surveillance, intelligence, reconnaissance, and so on. Where have they gone? Right? Where are the bodies? Where are the body parts? Where are the autopsies? It's like that at the London Underground bombing, where the body remains were taken out to a morgue erected on the grounds of the Honourable Artillery Company. Not one autopsy was done on them.
Wow. David, people in the comments are concerned about 5G technology, which is basically imminent in the United States and Europe and Canada. How does that play into any of this?
Well, these are short bandwidth, high information. They're part of the microwave transmission systems. It all depends on how much energy is being transmitted. Remember, you're receiving microwave energy from the sun every day. It's coming through the building, right, etc. So the level of microwave energy is not in itself dangerous. It's when people are harnessing it for evil purposes, right? And particularly when they attach the amount of energy that you're going to be receiving to some combination of artificial intelligence, fuzzy logic, or expert system algorithms, because the algorithms don't care. If the algorithms are being programmed to take you out because you're producing too much carbon dioxide, that's what they're going to do. No hard feelings. It's not personal.
Well, and likewise, if they're programmed to maximize profitability for investors, they may determine that a catastrophe bond to be taken out and used in combination with destroying a town is the best way to maximize profitability.
You've got it. And that's why that incredibly sinister phrase, socially responsible investing. I don't know if you got a chance to read. I sent it to you in that Skype text stuff. Where socially responsible investment means that the community is looking at the environmental effects, where they allege carbon dioxide is toxic, and the diversity of the organization, meaning that you have to have, 50% of the LGBT community running Boeing.
Well, you know
Nothing
what?
personal.
Right. Well, and they need 50% of their legs, correct?
Now you're picking up. Remember, we stray into dangerous territory.
Exactly. But, as you say this, it causes me to recall an interview that George Soros did with 60 Minutes in the late 1980s, where he talks about his inability to be socially responsible when it comes to investing, because he was just interested in making money. And
well, I guess when he was a 14-year-old teenager in Eastern Europe and his father was forging papers that would allow the Jews to escape, this lad was going around and selling the forged papers or turning in the Jews so they could go to the concentration camp in the gas chambers. I mean, Soros is a disgusting human being, and he should be, I think, taken out with all the rest of this socially responsible investing.
Yeah, yeah. I'm trying to bring up, I had saved it as a Microsoft Word document, and Microsoft is not cooperating right now. I don't know why, but that was an interesting document that you had there. Let's see if we can get it here. We're just about out of time, David. Was there anything else that you, here we go, we can look at this really quickly. We've got this, yeah, this is, I just copied the email that you sent me into this Microsoft Word document here. Should we look up this method and systems for combining securities?
Well, I think we should all do it as a piece of homework, and I think the listeners, if they really want to understand what the swamp looks like, and I think it could help Trump enormously, if that's what he wants to do, is really drain the swamp, is to look at the structure or the aggregate of funds assembled on the 47th floor, probably by Serco's investment banker. And this is where I think Trump might have a conflict of interest, because Serco's investment banker is N.M. Rothschild and Sons Limited, and that is the investment banker for Donald Trump and Queen Elizabeth II, right?
Yeah.
So there's a bit of a problem there, right?
Right.
If as I believe, the aggregate funds assembled on the 47th floor were assembled by N.M. Rothschild for a bit of socially responsible investing in the body counts and carbon saved when the towers came down, then Trump may lose his appetite to drain the swamp, because his Commerce Secretary, Wilbur Ross, has spent 25 years with N.M. Rothschild and Son, and Wilbur Ross, as Commerce Secretary, has de facto custody of the Patent Office, which is run by Serco.
Wow. It's astounding, David. I mean, you've got a way of putting these things together that nobody else has. That's really the reason why it's so important that people become sponsors on patreon.com. Even though we're doing this show now here on YouTube and Periscope and Facebook, people can see more of David's posts by going to patreon.com/reverse CSI storyboards. And of course, there's no way I could do this show without David. So it's important that our viewers who are watching on patreon.com/reverse, which on Crowdsource the Truth, also become sponsors of patreon.com/reverse CSI storyboards. And we're getting close to the end of the month, so hopefully people will get on there. David, this cough is just totally making it difficult for me to speak. So I think with that, we'll wrap it up. We'll be back on Friday for our regular show, which of course has a teaser segment on YouTube, but the main meat of it takes place only on Patreon. So people who enjoy David's analysis and are as fascinated by this reverse engineered crime scene investigation process as I am, I hope will get onto Patreon and join us there this Friday. David, I'm looking forward to that conversation for sure.
Thank you very much, Jason. See you Friday.
Absolutely. Have a great afternoon, and thanks for watching, everybody. Come back at 5 o'clock. We're going to be closing in with Charles Ortel. So many developments. The Clintons are getting worried. Bye, David.
Bye.